Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. Today is May 1st, 2020. I'm Len Edgerly, recording in Ocean Park, Maine. I have the puppy Sophie here with me. She was making noise downstairs, so she is sitting right in front of the MacBook Pro while we put the show together. Darlene is out getting some takeout at a tasty place which is doing curbside takeout here in Ocean Park, the Garage, and Sophie and I hope that we've got the show up for you by the time she gets back. My interview this week is with Szczepan Twardoch, who is an author from Poland. He's written a book that has just been released last week by Amazon Crossing called The King of Warsaw. That's the title. And it's a powerful book. It's in some ways a challenging book, as you'll hear in our conversation. But I had a chance to talk to him this week by Zoom from Maine to Poland, southern Poland, where he lives in a rural area, and heard about the background behind the book, and you get a sense of history from this book as well as it's quite an opportunity for him because it's the first time he's had one of his books translated into English. He's been a very successful best-selling author in Poland, in Polish up till now. He's about 40, so interesting conversation. And for the news, I'm going to give you some highlights of the Amazon earnings report, which came out yesterday, and some aspects of it that I think are particularly notable in thinking about what's ahead for Amazon. Let's get started. So the news yesterday was that Amazon released its financial results for the first quarter ending in March, and the revenue was up $75.5 billion. That's for the quarter, and that was a 26% increase from the same quarter in 2019. It was also ahead of what the Wall Street analysts expected. Their consensus forecast was $73.6 billion, so there was a $2 billion increase over what they were expecting in terms of the sales. Now, profit was a different story because that came in at $5.01 a share, and that fell short of what the analysts had estimated. They thought it would come in at $6.25 a share, and that's why the stock price closed down 7.6% today. That was a deeper hit than the Dow Industrials, which fell 622 points today, or down 26%. The press release which Amazon put out announcing the results contained some further explanation from Jeff Bezos as to how he's seeing Amazon's role at this time in the coronavirus crisis. And there's a couple of statements here I want to read to you just because they sound like Jeff actually wrote them, and everything is coming from kind of the same place of seriousness on his part as to how to respond to this environment on behalf of Amazon, and how he's taking the reins of the company in a way that he hasn't been up until this. He's looking at more long-term aspects of his leadership. He wrote, "Providing for customers and protecting employees as this crisis continues for more months is going to take skill, humility, invention, and money. If you are a shareholder in Amazon, you may want to take a seat because we are not thinking small." Bezos went on to say that in the next quarter, Amazon would normally expect to earn $4 billion or more in operating profit. Instead, he said, we expect to spend the entirety of that $4 billion and perhaps a bit more on COVID-related expenses, getting products to customers, and keeping employees safe. He specified the general areas that this $4 billion is going to be spent on next quarter: investments in personal protective equipment, enhanced cleaning of facilities, less efficient processes that allow better social distancing, that's in the fulfillment centers, higher hourly wages, that's already been announced, and then hundreds of millions of dollars to develop our own COVID-19 testing capabilities. His summary was directed as much toward Wall Street as anyone else. He said, there is a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, and the best investment we can make is in the safety and well-being of our hundreds of thousands of employees. I'm confident that our long-term oriented share owners will understand and embrace our approach, and that, in fact, they would expect nothing less or no less. Barron's had a roundup of the key analysts that cover the company. These are people. I know a guy who was an analyst at on Wall Street. He was in Providence, but he worked as part of the Wall Street analyst community, analyzing the energy industry. And these are fascinating jobs because these guys or women get assigned a company, and their job is just to learn everything they can about the company, and they try to have sources within the company, and they're in on earnings calls, and their whole job is to try to assess future results of the company, because that's going to drive stock price. And so when you hear from these people about what they're expecting from Amazon or another company, I don't know if you're getting smarter analysis than you would from financial journalists like the Wall Street Journal, but you're getting wisdom from people who at least are spending a great deal of time trying to understand the fundamentals of a company. So with that background, it's interesting to see what some of these people who are covering Amazon are saying the day after this fairly dramatic earnings report came out. This article that I'm going to be quoting analysts from was written in Barron's, and the author is Eric J. Savitz. The title is Amazon Stock is Falling, Why It Could Be a Phenomenal Buying Opportunity. And the context here, he points out that Amazon's stock has been up 34% for the year through yesterday's close. And Barron's reported that more than a dozen analysts raised their target prices on the stock this morning. They all have a target price. If the price is this, then they're expecting something higher or lower depending on their analysis. The one that was the most bullish was at J.P. Morgan, someone named Doug Anmuth, and he increased his target price for AMZN to $3,000 a share, up from $2,525 before the earnings report. That was his target, and he raised it quite a bit. He wrote, "We believe that Amazon is perhaps the only company that can service customers this well with scale and effectiveness during the crisis." And he said higher costs in the near term, as Bezos outlined, could actually increase customer loyalty and lead to faster adoption of e-commerce. Sophie, we've got to calm down here. Brian Nowak of Morgan Stanley said he sees Amazon's commitment to investing in protective gear for staff and customers eventually giving Amazon a competitive advantage as customers place a higher bar on the sterility of their packages and products. And then Rohit Kulkarni at MKM Partners theorized that Amazon could become a serious player in healthcare coming out of the COVID downturn. That makes sense to me, given the bold initiative of creating the COVID testing lab, which, as Jerry Riddle pointed out last week when we were talking about it, that's not a weekend project. That's a pretty serious initiative, which is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. I haven't seen this mentioned in coverage so far, but I've been very intrigued at this partnership that Amazon set up with J.P. Morgan and Berkshire Hathaway. It's named Haven, and it's a partnership that is designed to think of better and innovative ways to handle the health care for the 1.2 million employees of those three companies. And they picked last year Atul Gawande as CEO of Haven, and it's based in Boston. Gawande is a brilliant writer and surgeon, and someone that I've admired greatly, mainly because of his writing. But when I've heard him talk about this project, it seems like he's a brilliant choice. And when I see that Amazon is building a lab to do COVID testing, I'm sure that Atul Gawande and his group is deeply involved in what they're doing and what kind of impact that might have on Amazon's employees and those of the other two companies. So it's not difficult for me to imagine that Amazon, by doing the right thing in a bold way during this coronavirus crisis, might very well emerge into yet another era of innovation, growth, and success. So as a very small shareholder, I am very happy to take a seat and watch the show. Sophie, not so happy to take a seat, are you? Do you have anything you want to add to Amazon's prospects? I'm not sure there's going to be any veterinary aspects to it, but we are ordering things for her that show up here at the door at Ocean Park, and it's always kind of amazing to me. But we had some Whole Foods delivery made today. There have been times when we haven't been able to get deliveries, but today it came through very easily, and we are well stocked, and pretty soon we'll be having some barbecue. I'm not sure if you're going to have any barbecue with us or not. Time now for the interview. I'm going to spell my guest's name, and then I'm going to give you my attempt to pronounce it. I've heard some audio, and I got some help from Shimon Schott, who's a listener in Krakow. It's spelled S-Z-C-Z. That's 4 letters before we reach a vowel, which is E, and then P-A-N. And I think that's Szczepan. And then Twardoch is T-W-A-R-D-O-C-H. So Szczepan Twardoch, at the age of 40, is one of the most read and revered novelists of his generation in Poland. But until last week, none of his books had been translated into English. Amazon Crossing, which is the translation imprint of Amazon Publishing, changed that with its publication last week of The King of Warsaw, an English translation by Sean Gasper of Szczepan's 2016 novel, which was published in Polish as Król, which means the king. I connected with Szczepan on Wednesday, April 29th, via Zoom to his room in a rural area of southern Poland. I wanted to hear how the book sounds in its original language, so I asked Szczepan to read the first few paragraphs in Polish, followed by the same passage in English.
Okay, so I will read in Polish now.
Okay, great.
Alef. Mojego ojca zabił wysoki, przystojny Żyd o szerokich ramionach i potężnych plecach machabejskiego boksera. Teraz stoi w ringu. To ostatnia walka wieczoru i ostatnie koło tej walki, a ja patrzę na niego z pierwszego rzędu. Nazywam się Mojżesz Bernstein. Mam 17 lat i nie istnieję. Nazywam się Mojżesz Bernstein. Mam 17 lat i nie jestem człowiekiem. Jestem nikim. Nie mam mnie, nie istnieję. Jestem chudym, ubogim synem nikogo i patrzę na tego, który zabił mojego ojca. Patrzę, jak stoi w ringu, piękny i silny. Nazywam się Mojżesz Imbar. Mam 67 lat. Zmieniłem nazwisko. Siedzę przy maszynie do pisania i piszę. Nie jestem człowiekiem, nie mam nazwiska. Alef. My father was killed by a tall, handsome Jew with the broad shoulders of a strong back of Maccabi boxer. Now that boxer stands in the ring. It's the last fight of the evening and the last round of the fight, and I'm watching him from the first row. My name is Mojżesz Bernstein. I'm 17, and I don't exist. My name is Mojżesz Bernstein. I'm 17, and I'm not a person. I am no one. There is no me. I do not exist. I'm the skinny, impoverished son of nobody, and I'm looking at the man who killed my father. I see him standing in the ring, handsome and strong. My name is Mojżesz Imbar. I'm 67. I've changed my name. I'm sitting at the typewriter writing. I'm not a person. I have no name.
That's great. Thank you. Well, let's start by setting the scene. I did a little looking around. I saw that Warsaw in 1937 appeared to have a population not too much different than now, 1.3 million, maybe 1.7 million people now. But I imagine that in the last 70 plus years, almost everything has changed in Warsaw. I was going to start by asking you, other than the population similarity, is there anything that's the same in Warsaw now than in the period you write about in this novel?
Well, the river stays in the same place it used to be.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I don't think so, in fact, because first of all, Warsaw back then, 8 years ago, was a multicultural city, and about 30% of its population was Jewish, and the city was also like divided geographically there were Jewish neighborhoods, Polish neighborhoods, and so on. Well, also the material substance of the city was completely different because during the war, about 60% of buildings in Warsaw was destroyed, was ravished to the ground.
Wow.
So the city also looked different back then.
Yeah. Your book first came out in Polish in 2016. And I think I've seen you said that there were some hard things for Polish readers to confront in the history of this period before the war. What were the hardest things for Polish readers to confront in your book? And how did people in Poland react to the book when it first came out, given that it had some difficult material?
Well, it's being conscious about the levels of anti-Semitism which were embedded in pre-war structure of the state, of the society in Poland,
mm-hmm.
because there is this glorified vision of pre-war Poland, which was paradoxically strengthened by communist propaganda after the Second World War, which used to show the pre-war Poland as, this cruel capitalist state. And in reaction for that propaganda, there was this growing myth of this beautiful, just country, which in fact as we call it, the Second Republic, Druga Rzeczpospolita, the Second Republic, it wasn't a just, beautiful country Polish society wants to believe. I think this I don't know if such a word exists in English. Like demythologization?
Demytholization. I have trouble in English too, so it's a tough word in either language. I know what you mean, though.
Yeah. This thing was I think the hardest part, and the reactions for the book in Poland were somewhat divided. It was an instant bestseller, which surprised me back then. It's my absolutely best-selling book from everyone I wrote.
Really?
And on the other hand, the critical response was, as I said, divided. It was divided in the lines of political conflict in Poland, but also from artistic point of view, because it's. I would say the King of Warsaw is the most popular from all the novels I wrote. So I think the critics were somewhat expecting me to stick to the higher literary levels, to the higher prose than and the King of Warsaw is. I'm not the person to judge my book, obviously. I meant it to be like intermediate between the high prose and the popular prose, using the means of the both worlds. So being, on the one hand, being a sensational criminal gangster story, but also having more than only action inside.
Right. The confusion of the narrator, which is in that first part that you read, I think that gives it perhaps a higher literary feel to it, where you're doing some creative things in the telling of the story, which the high literary types tend to admire. And but I can see how you straddle both worlds. It's a very compelling page-turner book, and the writing seems ambitious and somewhat daring.
Okay, thank you. It's nice thing to hear.
Now, when you wrote the book, did you imagine or hope that there would be an English translation of the book and therefore would have readers in America?
I'm not sure. It was like a few years ago. yesterday my Facebook page showed me that I've started writing The King exactly 5 years ago, and I was in quite a different situation back then. In fact, I was thinking about television adaptation from the very beginning, because the first treatment of the novel, the first treatment of the story was drafted as a treatment of the television series. I did it as a treatment of the television series, and only later I realized that I want to write a novel first. And now the TV series are it is ready now. It is in post production. It will premiere in late fall.
Really?
In November. In November, I guess.
And how will we be able to see that here in the United States?
I'm not sure. It will be on VOD, and it's produced by a French television. Well, the Polish branch of the French multi-channel television Canal Plus.
Yes, right.
So and they will have it on their VOD app, but. Yes. I have no knowledge whatsoever about the possibilities to see it in the United States, but I obviously hope it will be possible.
Yeah. Are you pleased with the video version compared with the book?
Yes. I co-wrote it and I co-created the series. I was present on set most of the time. It's also my work. It's not only the adaptation of my novel, but I also work on the series. So also here, I'm not in the position to judge if it's good or not, because it's also my work.
Right.
Apart, obviously, from the big team of people. But yes, I'm proud of it somehow. It has what was important for me in the novel. And it is still present in the television adaptation of it. And the main character played by brilliant actor Michał Żurawski. It's like Jakub Shapiro from my imagination. It's exactly how I wanted him to be. He has this silent power, somewhat animal. In him, he has the rage of my character from the novel, and I loved his work.
And will it be a Polish TV series with English subtitles, or how will it appear?
What I value a lot is that I think it's the first bilingual TV series in Polish television to this amount, because we have it in Polish and Yiddish. We have a lot of Yiddish dialogue in that, of subtitled, obviously. But I like it a lot because it reminds us that the pre-war Warsaw was a bilingual city. In fact, it was not only Polish-sounding city like it is now. Maybe now it's a little bilingual again because there is quite substantial Ukrainian and Belarusian diaspora in Warsaw. So now you again can hear other languages on the streets of Warsaw. Well, but not Yiddish anymore.
Right. The book is about violence, or violence is a key element of the book. And I've read that you learned to box because your character, Jakub Shapiro, he's a Jewish gangster and a boxer. I'm wondering, as someone who didn't know how to box and you took boxing lessons, did you learn anything about violence just as a boxer that you didn't know before you went into the ring and were learning how to box? What new thing did you understand about violence just by doing that?
I think I did, and I must say I've started to really admire the sport, and I finished this book 4 years ago, and I'm still boxing. Although I switched from boxing to Muay Thai and kickboxing, it's more interesting. But I still train. And what I've learned, apart from some skills, which I very slowly acquired, because I'm obviously I was too old to achieve anything in this sport on the any else level than totally amateurish.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned from my first sparrings is the amount of animal fear you experienced when you really have to confront someone physically. It was a very important experience for me. I think I've learned something about how the animal or either reptilian part of our brain takes the control on the rest, on the whole. And there is this funny moment in sparrings. Even if you spar with friends, then before the sparring, you have this like gentleman's agreement, like, hey buddy, let's do it like on 20% of power, okay? Yeah, obviously technical and so on. And then you go into the ring, and you are trying to do this as you both agreed on. That's a 20% of power, gentleman's sparring, and then you get hit in the face. And when you get hit in the face, you don't think about technical sparring, about 20%. You just this moment of rage exploding in you, and rage mixed with fear, with pain. You have to have a vast amount of the will, of the strength of will to fight it inside, to stay calm.
Yeah.
And if you want to win, you have to stay calm, because if you let your rage take the reins, you will lose. There is a vast amount of very interesting experiences for me as a writer to achieve from boxing. Yeah.
There's a great description of Jakob that when you're describing the fight, you say the most terrifying thing to see in a boxer is a smile, indicating that he is calm. And from what you just said, that shows that his will is still in charge of his fighting, which makes him more dangerous, perhaps. I guess
that's true, yes.
How about, could you describe Jan Buddy
Kaplica?
Who is he and what is he like?
This character, he's based on the real-time pre-war gangster from Warsaw. I've changed the name because I wanted to have more freedom with his biography, but he's very similar to the guy called Tata Tasiemka, which translates into English as Daddy the Ribbon. And he was like my Kaplica, Buddy Kaplica. He was the socialist freedom fighter, I would say. He was fighting with Tsarist Russia, and after the First World War, I think he was somewhat used to this, illegal type of life. He wasn't going to have a normal life and a free Polish Republic he was fighting for. So he chooses to be a racketeer, and he built with his Jewish co-worker, also gangster. He built the largest Polish Jewish gang of pre-war Warsaw. He was this kind of a scary character but also with this patriarchal figure for the Warsaw underworld. People were scared of him, but also admired him a lot. he had a lot of respect on the streets, also because of his past, and he had strong political connections due to the fact that his old comrades from Socialist Party were like prime ministers and so on. So, but the small qualities of this character, these are all fictional. I've created him as this jovial, pedophile, right?
That's a good way of explaining how complex a character he is.
Yeah, that part is fictional. His female companion, Rivka Key, the owner of this brothel, she is also a fictional. Well, she is a fictional character, but I've used the name. I've used the name of one of Buddy Kaplica's co-workers from the real world, because I liked the sound of it. Because Rivka Key in Polish means Rivka, the stick. So, and I liked the sound and the meaning of that. So that's how I came with her.
Now, since writing The King, you've now got a new book, The Kingdom, that was published in the fall of 2018. Do you know, maybe you can't say this early, but does Amazon Crossing plan to bring out a translation of The Kingdom as well?
I have no idea about that. Well, I would be delighted if they do, but I don't know as you know.
And how is that book different than The King of Warsaw?
It's completely different. It has the same characters, but it's the genre of the book is different, and it was purposeful. I did it on purpose. The action of the kingdom is set during the Second World War in the ghetto, and then after the second Polish uprising in the deserted Warsaw, and it doesn't have this sensational gangster qualities of the King of Warsaw. It has much more somber tone, and I think it's much more cruel also.
You have an interesting quote, at least I don't know if it was the same in the Polish version, but in the English version, there is an opening quote from Ishmael in Moby Dick, and the quote is simply, "Who ain't a slave?" And I was fascinated, but somewhat baffled by the surrealistic image you have in the book of a sperm whale sort of floating above everything in a very ominous way. If someone is writing a PhD thesis someday, will there be any reason for them to try to compare Moby Dick with Litani?
Because of the quote in the beginning of the book, and I use the same in Polish. It's it is somewhat obvious, right, to compare the Litany with Moby Dick, right? And it was done on purpose, but it's also there's in Bible and also in Kabbalah, there's this important story of the fight between the Leviathan and Behemoth, which was later understood by Jewish scholars as the metaphor of the fight. For example, it was on one of the interpretation as the great war between the powers of the sea and the powers of the earth. It could mean states, but it could also mean more mystical powers. I found that story very interesting. It was this very strong image. It was important for me. There's this great painting by William Blake with the behemoth fighting the Leviathan under the eye of God the Father and so on. So litany, it's the first version, Phoenician word for Leviathan.
Oh, I see.
I wanted to have this name for the sperm whale because of the metaphorical value of Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing author should do is to be a glossa for his own book, especially if he or she uses a poetical metaphor. There is something about being under the shadow of the monster. I think this is something you could feel when you experience the history written with the capital H.
It reminds me a little of coronavirus, this sense of worldwide danger and death stalking us in almost a metaphorical way. But there's always something out there that's terrifying and bigger than we can understand.
Well, yeah, especially when we thought for 15 years or for 20 years, we really believed, or we wanted to believe, in the end of history, and we really had this. It was also the biblical somehow, that we wanted to believe that we are living in the end of times. The history of the world is fulfilled, and now we are going to live in this flat plain where the lion can lay with the lamb.
No more violence, except in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
You were going to be on a panel next month at PEN America World Voices Festival, and the title of the panel was Surviving Fascism Then and Now, and I think there were going to be 3 people on it, including you. Were you preparing to say something about that topic of fascism 80 years ago versus fascism now in relation to your book, or perhaps just in your general insights as a writer?
I think I would start with the sentence I always use when I'm asked this question, because I'm asked the question, if the King of Warsaw, or the king, is it a historical metaphor for our times? Or on the other hand, are we again in the early 30s and we are living in the world where fascism is on the rise? And I always said, no, it's not a metaphor. And because the historical analogy is one of the weakest means to understand the presence, because it gives us the false certainty that we already understood what's going on. The world now isn't like in the 30s. I think it's far more complex, far more. Whole the world is intertwined together. I have the sad feeling that the present world is beyond our comprehension. Maybe as a humanity in a whole, we are maybe we are able to have this grasp on the world that we could turn it one way or the other, but the complexity of the world we are living now, maybe it says something only about me, that I'm too dumb to comprehend the world and its complexity. And maybe I shouldn't judge everybody with my abilities. And it's a very frightening feeling for me. This feeling of the complexity of the world, which is absolutely beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, and compared with what we think of the 30s, we think, well, it's easy to tell who was evil and who was good.
And I'm not saying only about the moral distinctions. Because it's the I think it's the easiest part to say someone is wrong, someone is good, or something like that. Now, when we think about the 30s in the, for example, in Germany after the First World War, we can quite easily draw or describe the reasons of the rise of fascism. You can divide them between the economical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You can describe them in a psychoanalytical ways, like, for example, Klaus Theweleitf is doing in his great book, which is called, I think it's Male Bodies, the Psychoanalytics of Fascism, and so on and so on. You can have a very deep insight in this also complex situation. But we have no tools whatsoever to get this insight in the world we are living now.
Yeah, I see the difference.
Also because, for obvious reasons, a lot of our reality is hidden from us. We don't have the access to the archives as we do when you want to, write about history. Then you can read whole documents which are secret as for now, for obvious reasons. But not only that, I think that the complexity of the world is growing bigger and bigger.
Well, congratulations on your book now being available in the U.S. I think Amazon will do a good job marketing it, so there will be lots of new readers that have a chance to understand the questions that you haven't answered yet. So your questions will now spread across America as well, I think in a very good way. I have been speaking with Szczepan Twardoch, the author of The King of Warsaw, which was published last week by Amazon Crossing. Thanks very much, Szczepan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. I'm not sure who I will be speaking with next week for the interview. I put Sophie downstairs in her bed, and I think I just heard the car door, which means Darlene is home with the barbecue, so the timing was pretty good. For those of you listening to the Morning Journal, my Alexa Flash briefing, I had thought I might try to put this episode together on the iPad Pro using a new software editing program that I came across, and it was going to be too big a lift. I started looking at a couple of the tutorials of that program, and it was clear that if I was going to try to do this episode with it, compared with my tried and true procedure on Logic Pro and my MacBook Pro, you wouldn't have been hearing it till sometime around noon tomorrow. But I think this program is going to be strong enough to handle it, and eventually, if I could get to where I am using Ferrite, it's called Ferrite, then I might actually be able to switch from a lapbook computer to this elegant iPad, which attaches now to it's called a Magic Keyboard, and the screen almost kind of floats at different angles, and the actual keyboard is better. It has better key action than the MacBook Pro that I've been using for the last several years, and it also has a trackpad. So all of a sudden I'm working on a tablet, the iPad, and it feels very much like working on a laptop computer. Now, the operating system is very different, and whether I am going to really be able to do this podcast as well as I want to do it, that's going to be a work in progress. But I now have all the pieces together to see if I can use these new Apple devices in a way that frees me from the laptop and kind of points in the post-laptop era, which I have a pretty strong feeling that's now just arriving. And Microsoft, in a way, had a bit of a head start with the Microsoft Surface. I had one of those for a while, and it was quite wonderful. Although the key pad was kind of lame, I thought. But this is elegant, beautiful Apple design, and I'm going to have a lot of fun learning about it. We've been at Ocean Park now a month and a half. The sea outside my window here is calming down some. We've had really bad weather the last few days, cold and rainy, and I think it's going to be nice tomorrow. We might be able to get out on the trail and do some bike rides. So wherever you are staying in place, I hope it's going well for you, and look forward to talking to you again next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.